Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science. We've been sitting with the Chris Watts case for over a year, and as is becoming abundantly obvious, there are more and more what the F moments associated with this case. And as part of the process of just doing research around the first mentioning of the word choke and smothered and strangled, I stumbled upon something that made me go, what the F? And it's something we've all seen, but I'm not sure whether we've sort of seen it in the way that I guess it should be seen. Now, I'm going to speak for a short while, and then I'm going to let you guys listen to the footage. And this is following where Chris Watts confesses to his father. Then his father mentions a lawyer. The agents rush back in, and then Watts sort of, with his head bowed, sort of goes through everything with the agents. And every now and then, Agent Tammy Lee sort of prods him for some more information, and then he gives a bit more information. When I came across this particular clip, I actually thought it wasn't accurate. In other words, the clip where you see Ronnie Watts looking at his phone while his son is admitting to his wife killing his daughters and him killing his wife. When I saw the text underneath that and the Ronnie looking at his phone, I thought, wow, that is what the F, right? When I went to source the actual content, I thought more than likely they've sensationalized this, and what you're literally going to find is that yes, Watts did say this at one point, but it wasn't when Ronnie was looking at his phone. But the the reality is he was looking at his phone. A lot of us can't understand why Chris Watts is the way that he is. We can't understand that he doesn't show emotion. We can't understand that he behaves the way that he does. But when you see his own father sitting beside him, purposefully reaching for his glasses, carefully going through the phone, and you know what he's doing? He's looking for an image that Shan'ann supposedly took, or an image that implicates her in the crime. That's what his father was doing while his son is talking about killing her, right? So Ronnie hasn't taken very long, literally a couple of minutes, to go from surprise to not surprised, and now trying to assist his son in pinning the murder on his wife. And it wasn't his wife, right? But Ronnie Watts is already coming to the rescue of his son in terms of this photo. It is pretty incredible. It's incredible to see his father sort of able to think so clearly under these circumstances, which would have anyone else compromised emotionally, and have anyone else not on their phone, but sort of having a human moment with their son and emotions. But it seems like Watts' emotions aren't real, his words aren't real, but even his father is in a calculated space at that very moment, which is quite interesting. Before I play the clip, there's another aspect I just want to emphasize, and it's on page 602 of the discovery documents. I'm going to go through it in reverse order. Ronnie asked Chris if Shan'ann was choking Cece and if Shan'ann killed Cece. Watts answered they were blue. Ronnie then asks both of them, and Chris says yes. Ronnie asked if Shan'ann choked both of them to death, and he said, I freaked out and did the same thing to her. Watt said he didn't call the police about what happened, and then Ronnie said, well, what did you do? Haul the bodies off or something? Watt said he didn't know what else to do and freaked out. And then Ronnie goes through it again. So Shan'ann choked both Bella and Cece, and he lost it and choked Shan'ann. And in all of these references, Ronnie uses the word choked. And there are 5 references in all. And in not one instance does Chris Watts use the word choke. In one of the last references, Ronnie clarifies with Chris, so he's putting it to Chris over and over again, did you choke Shan'ann? Did Shan'ann do this to the children? And when Watts admits it, he says, mm-hmm. He doesn't say, yes, I choked her. He says, mm-hmm. And it's important to bear in mind the semantics of choked, which Ronnie uses quite liberally. You know, did this person choke that one? Did that one choke that one? Again and again and again. And you can see Watts himself is reluctant to use the word. Instead, he says something like, I did the same thing. Right? If you go to one paragraph above, which is at the very top of page 603, that's where we actually get to the very first time Watts acknowledges in any scenario that Shan'ann had died and how she had died. And this is how it comes up. I'm going to read the discovery. Ronnie asked Chris if Shan'ann and the girls left after that, and Chris didn't answer. Ronnie asked if Shan'ann started hurting the kids, and Chris said they were. Ronnie told him to talk to him and tell him what happened. Chris whispered, she smothered them. They were smothered. So that is the first real admission from him. And look at the words that he chooses. Smothered. She says that Shan'ann smothered them, right? In the next paragraph, Ronnie is saying choked, but there's a difference between smothering and choked. Smothering implies unable to make a sound, and some other implement like a blanket or a pillow or something like that. Choking implies sort of just a handhold, right? Then Ronnie immediately asked, they what? And then Chris answered, she strangled them. So now Chris has already gone from saying she smothered them, they were smothered, to she strangled them. So now, just at this point, we now have 3 different words for the same thing. Smothered, strangled, and choked. Right? Ronnie's confused by this, and so he asks, she smothered them, or choken them. So he's trying to get clarity. Did she smother them or did she choke them? In other words, did she cover them in like a pillow, or did she kind of throttle them with her hands? And that's a term I'm using, where you put your hands around someone and you know there's that sort of jerking movement, right? And look at Chris's reply. He replies by saying, like I didn't hear anything, right? So let's just go back to that. His father asked him, did she smother them or did she choke them? And what's his answer isn't she smothered them or that she choked them. He answers, like I didn't, as if he's saying, I didn't smother them or I didn't choke them, right? Ultimately, how he answers is he says, I didn't hear anything. It's almost as if he's correcting himself. And I think that is actually true, is nothing was heard. And that brings back the theory that they weren't choked, smothered or strangled, because if they were, that would have been audible. And even in the context of the crime, if he was doing that to one of the children, the other child would have heard it and woken up. The other child would have heard it and been distressed. and then there's also the risk of other people, witnesses, neighbors, hearing it. And so I think that of all of that, which all of it is not true, but the fact that his own father suggested, you know, that they were choked, and what's also whispered that she was smothered, it's already that's fiction. But the one little piece that's fact is that nothing was heard, and that is why Watts prefers this term smothered, because that corresponds to that. Does that make sense? In any event, when you look at the picture of the doll, the doll is smothered. The doll is covered in kind of a wrapping, and that's pretty interesting as well. When the agents ask Watts what he thinks of that, he answers that Shan'ann thought it was a joke. She thought it was funny. Now, does he mean that in a real way, or does he mean that she was being threatening and sadistic, or whatever it is? It's quite an interesting question. In any event, listen to the audio carefully and watch the what the F moment, the moment it comes up. If you have any of your own suggestions, please let me know. We're going to make a top 10 list, and please subscribe, like, share a comment, and thank you for listening.
Are they all there? Oh, we're just eating. Just pop it. Right in front. Is there what? You might. Whatever. Okay. Raw. Plus easily. Sorry. No. And just the range of the limping hurt. Virology. Unfortunately, I cannot with our under wasteland as thought. Better fresh thought. To what get out there. I'm gonna try. What's that? Car record. The customer problem? Car record. Car record. And I put my hands around what's and did that thing. Did you need back at all? No. The reason that happened that you know she good. What do you make of it? That was fun.
So unfortunately the audio is not great. It's not great as it is even in the original. But I think I'm going to have to add this postscript just to be sort of clear. If you want to go and listen to the audio yourself, just go to the clip that shows the timestamp at 17:05, around about there, and sort of listen from then on. But the part that is significant and the part that is what the F is basically at the same time that Chris Watts is saying what he did to his wife, that he murdered his wife, that he murdered his children, or that the children were murdered. His father sitting right next to him, sort of scrolling on his phone. He doesn't even look up. Doesn't even look up when Watts says those words. And then again, you can turn the audio off if you like and just watch what happens. But it's basically what happens is his father doesn't have his hand on Chris's shoulder and he's just looking down, and he has his one hand, I think his left hand, sort of cupped over his forehead, so he's sort of blocking off the gaze of the two agents. It might actually be his right arm. And then he just waits, and he's obviously thinking about what he wants to say, and he's obviously waiting for his moment. And then there is a moment, there's quite a long pause. And then what happens is he then mentions the doll thing. So this is a situation where his son has just admitted to the agents that what he's admitted to him, and Ronnie doesn't waste any time in sort of going into high gear and providing reinforcing testimony that implicates Shan'ann, in other words this doll. And it's incredible how quickly Ronnie kind of got over the shock of the fact that his daughter-in-law has died and that his granddaughters are both dead, and he's quickly rallying to the aid of his son. And in certain respects, his psychology of being able to disconnect from the emotion and come up with a sort of a calculated response, you can see where Chris Watts gets it from. It's sort of a little bit like father, like son. In this context, it does seem likely that the doll isn't an innocent artifact in this whole story. It does seem to be part of the premeditation, and that Watts wanted the image on Shanann's phone, knowing that if something happened, people would look at her phone and through that image be suspicious that she had malicious intent towards her children, that she meant them harm. But the fact that she then immediately posted it onto Instagram saying, I don't know what this meant, with sort of two laughing faces, showing that she was amused by it or bemused by it, that I think messed up his little scheme. I don't think it was a brilliant scheme, but it does seem like it was intended to reflect badly on Shan'ann. And if you dispute that, if it seems unlikely, if it seems a stretch, then bear in mind exactly what Ronnie is doing right here. He's faced with the possibility that Shan'ann might be involved, and what does he do? He immediately goes to that image and he holds it up as proof to say, I think this was planned. I think Shan'ann planned it. And so in terms of if it was a ploy, well then it certainly worked with his father. And even Coda said, that's really interesting. And then he asked Watts for his opinion on it.